Narrator, tone, serious pain spread throughout my body, leaving me too weak to scream. Bright red blood flowed from my heart to the ground, staining my favorite floral jacket.
Avid, hunched over in front of me, carefully wiped the blood off the knife with his sleeve. At 81, his movements were undoubtedly unsteady.
David, why?
It wasn't supposed to be like this, Emily.
Narrator, tone, serious. I wanted to remind him that the blood on his sleeve could still be used as evidence, leading to a conviction. But I didn't have the strength to open my mouth or lift my hand.
You will be caught.
It won't matter anymore.
Narrator, tone, serious. Perhaps it was a final burst of energy. I saw David at different ages before my eyes. David at 10, David at 20, and finally David at 81, all with smiles on their faces, gently calling me Emily. But behind those smiles was a cold knife, piercing my heart.
We had so many memories.
Memories can't change what must be done.
Narrator, tone, sad. As I felt my body gradually grow colder, my life with David flashed before my eyes like a series of fleeting images. David and I were indeed entangled for a lifetime. When I was 10, I was already the little girl trailing behind David. Although we didn't attend the same elementary school, I would shamelessly go to David's house during every holiday to do homework with him. Perhaps my resentment was too strong, so after my passing, I became a soul wandering through the moments I spent with David. Though I could only watch everything unfold, I was fortunate enough to hear David's inner thoughts. In front of me was a little girl, around 10 years old, biting her pen and staring blankly at a difficult problem, while the boy across from her was engrossed in his own work.
David, how do you solve this? Can you teach me?
In the end, I was defeated by the difficult problem and looked at the boy in front of me with pleading eyes. He didn't speak, and the air fell into a brief silence. But at that moment, I heard his inner voice.
So annoying. She can't even do simple addition and subtraction. Why is she pretending?
Hearing this, I froze. In my memory, young David was like a gentle older brother. This was something I never expected to come from his mouth. Having grown up without a father's love, I was more inclined to show my vulnerable side to a boy my age. The girl, seeing that the boy didn't respond, continued to speak and pushed her workbook in front of him, looking pitiful.
I really don't know how to do it. I'm not lying.
Just do your homework quietly.
So annoying. Can't she leave soon?
The scene ended with the girl leaving with red eyes and a backpack, a seemingly heartwarming story wrapped up in such a hasty conclusion. The stage play became empty, the main characters left, and I, the audience, couldn't recover for a long time. Because I clearly remembered, I was indeed too dumb back then, stumbling over simple addition and subtraction. I never thought that David was already so annoyed with me at that time, so why did he agree to help me? After a moment of silence, I could feel my soul being forcibly torn apart. A vortex of white light swallowed my soul, and when I came to, I found myself standing on the asphalt road in front of the school gate. It was early summer, the cicadas were chirping, and the evergreen trees cast dappled shadows on David and me. Everything seemed almost too perfect. David was a year ahead of me, currently in his senior year of high school.
David, how are your studies going lately?
That day, my response was stammered and awkward, and I forgot what I said in between, ending with "I like you." I confessed to David that day, but he merely responded with a nonchalant without any further comment. He was already known as a cold and brilliant student at school, so when I heard that I was overjoyed. He had never paid attention to me before. Could this be a chance? I wondered.
Can you stop following me around like a fly?
I didn't understand. I had just asked him a question, how did it come to this? Although I couldn't feel any physical pain, my heart still ached. But the girl in front of me was still immersed in what she thought was happiness, coquettishly asking David.
How have you been lately?
Since David moved away, we rarely saw each other. David paused, a hot wind blowing past him, and I caught a hint of blush on his face.
Good.
But I heard another cold voice in my ear saying,
It would be even better without you.
The girl stopped as well, just about to hand over the chocolate she had hidden behind her back when a male voice interrupted.
Come on, let's go do some exercises.
The owner of the voice hooked his arm around David's shoulder. David's eyes lit up at that moment. Without responding to the girl behind him, he was ready to leave with his friend.
Can I visit you during the summer after my college entrance exams?
Sure.
The world seemed to stand still again, and at the same time, that cold voice reappeared.
This way, I can get rid of her, right?
I couldn't snap out of it for a long time. I never expected that the person I had loved for nearly 70 years would hate me so much. Reflecting on everything I had done, I couldn't find a reason for David's hatred. I saw David at different ages before my eyes. David at 10, David at 20, and finally David at 81, all with smiles on their faces, gently calling me Emily. But behind those smiles was a cold knife, piercing my heart. As I felt my body gradually grow colder, my life with David flashed before my eyes like a series of fleeting images. Unable to face the pain directly, I wanted to see what David was doing at that moment.
David, where are you?
Even though I called David, it was John who came.
Emily, it's me. You need to rest.
I floated 2 meters away only to be forcibly pulled back. After several attempts, the result was the same. I concluded that I couldn't leave my past self.
I don't want to see what happens next.
I crouched down in pain, holding my head, but I couldn't block out the sounds. Amidst the chaotic noise, painful memories were awakened, and images automatically surfaced in my mind.
How could David not want someone so beautiful?
John carried my half-drunk, half-awake self out of the bar. As he scrutinized me, his hands began to wander inappropriately over my body.
What are you doing? In my drunken state, I felt something groping me. When I opened my eyes, I found a strange man attempting to violate me.
David, help me.
My desperate and pale cry for help was the only action I could take to save myself at that moment. In that instant, it felt as if I had conquered my inner nightmare. I stood up and coldly watched the scene.
David doesn't want you anymore. Why are you still calling him?
I floated beside them, watching my terrified, semi-conscious self. I reached out to wipe away the tears, but my hand passed through my cheek once again.
A force kicked John away, and he let out a scream. It was then that I saw the man approaching in the moonlight. By the time David arrived, John had already stripped me down to my underwear. David, you have...
Leave.
David looked at my sleeping form, took off his jacket, and gently wrapped it around me. He carried me away. The scene froze again, leaving behind a mess.
The latter part felt like rewatching a movie, and I focused on finding details I hadn't noticed before. Like my dependence on David, like my trust in David, like how I never heard David's inner thoughts. From the moment David entered to the moment he left, the only word I heard was leave. Perhaps it was just the urgency of the situation, and he didn't have time to think.
The world reassembled, and the clock ticked away. This time, we were in front of the Civil Affairs Bureau. I was holding David's arm as we walked out, happiness radiating from my face.
David, we finally got married.
This was 3 years after that drunken night. When I sobered up, I confessed to David again, and he agreed.
3 years allowed our careers to stabilize. The day before, I suggested getting our marriage certificate, and the next day, David took me to the Civil Affairs Bureau. I knew David was a workaholic, but I didn't want him to work too hard, so I suggested.
David, can you come home for dinner from now on? And don't work too hard.
David just frowned slightly, then relaxed. After a long pause, he finally said,
Okay.
I happily tightened my grip on David's arm with one hand, holding the marriage certificate in the sunlight with the other.
David, do you think the old me would be proud if she knew I actually married you?
The voice stopped abruptly, and the scene froze with the marriage certificate backlit by the sun. I didn't know what this scene was for. I only knew that I could no longer hear David's inner thoughts.
In those few seconds of his frowning silence, my world was so quiet you could hear a pin drop.
The next few scenes came in quick succession, each one brief. The content was largely the same, me quietly waiting for my husband after preparing dinner, and the sound of David's punctual arrival at the door.
David, you're home.
Yes, Emily. Dinner smells wonderful.
Over these 55 years, David could certainly be considered a dutiful and responsible husband. He was considerate of his wife, successful in his career, and never indulged in frivolous activities. Yet, it seemed like this wife could have been anyone. Until David ended my life, we had never been intimate, never had children. A familiar white light flashed, and a table with two people appeared before me. The lights were dimmed, leaving only the flickering candlelight. It was David's 30th birthday.
David, do you like children?
I paused halfway through cutting my steak, setting down the utensils to look at David's face in the dim candlelight.
No, I don't.
Previously blinded by love, I hadn't noticed, but now I truly saw how well-mannered David was. I could clearly see a moment of disdain on his face before he looked up. Perhaps he saw the probing look in my eyes, and that disdain was replaced by indifference. He even disliked my breathing, yet he still responded to me, not wanting me to feel neglected. He gave me enough dignity and illusions. The play had reached its climax, and the actors continued their performance.
Then let's not have children, okay?
There was no response, and I lowered my head in shame. Soon, I felt a force on my shoulder, then a hand caressing my face. David bent down, his breath warm against my ear.
If you don't like it, we won't have any. I'll talk to my mom.
Okay, David, thank you. Happy birthday.
As if to repay him, I made a promise.
I'll spend every birthday with you from now on.
The final image was of our intertwined hands, resembling a loving couple. I stared at the scene, unable to detect any flaw.
After that day, David's mother never talked to me about having children again. I thought it was because David respected me.
But now it seems he couldn't wait to leave me. But why didn't he divorce me? Why did he stay with me until we were 80?
It wasn't that I couldn't hear David's thoughts anymore. It was that my words no longer elicited any reaction from him. He didn't even dislike me anymore.
The scene before my eyes blurred and then cleared again, revealing 81-year-old David wiping the back of a knife.
This was when I went to get the cake.
David was alone at home. He sat in front of the coffee table, carefully wiping the back of the knife. Each movement was gentle, as if he were handling a precious treasure. The knife's back gleamed, reflecting his wrinkled face.
Darling, my darling. Darling, my darling.
It was as if he had lost his mind, repeating the phrase over and over.
Click! The door opened. I had just picked up the cake from the floor when I was startled by the gleaming knife in David's hand. David, there's a knife here to cut the cake.
I held the cake and walked forward with difficulty, not understanding why he suddenly picked up a knife.
David, what are you doing?
Silently approached me with the knife.
The words in his heart remained, "Darling, my darling." Seeing this scene made my back tingle with fear. until David pushed me down in the image, holding the knife with both hands and aiming straight for my heart.
This is the end, Emily.
David was a surgeon, precisely intending to end my life. Perhaps due to his age, his strength was insufficient. He pulled out the knife, and bright red blood splattered onto his face. David didn't care and raised the knife again, stabbing fiercely into the same spot.
After 10 stabs, the elderly person lying on the ground had long since stopped breathing. Only then did David breathe a sigh of relief, slowly supporting himself on the sofa to stand up, the knife falling into the pool of blood.
Sophia, I am finally free of you.
These were the words he spoke. Watching the recording of my own demise, I felt an indescribable sensation. The scene slowly faded from my view, and I found myself back beside my 80-year-old self. Next to the cold, lifeless body. David called the police. The officers found it hard to believe that an 81-year-old man had killed his 80-year-old wife with a knife. But everything at the scene told them that it had indeed happened. David was taken away by them, and my soul did not disappear but continued to follow him. From the moment the police arrived to now sitting in the police car, David remained silent.
In his heart, he kept murmuring, "To live, I want to live."
Happiness, I want happiness.
The police watched David and couldn't help but sigh.
Probably another case of someone losing their mind and committing a crime, huh?
Yeah, when he wakes up and realizes his partner is gone, he'll be devastated.
I sat nearby, overhearing their conversation. I wasn't sure if David had any mental illness, but if he knew I was gone, he might actually be happy.
Not good. It looks like he took poison.
Hurry, get him to the hospital.
I knew David had really taken poison. Because at that moment, David's spirit was floating right in front of me.
Sophia?
I instinctively nodded, responding to David had become second nature to me. He might have been angry, trying to punch me, but two spirits can't touch each other. His punches hit nothing but air, and in frustration, he kept swinging, failing each time.
Why can't you leave me alone even after death? Why? Why?
But a spirit can do nothing, his hands passing through my body.
Why did you hate me so much? Why did you stay with me for so long if you hated me, without getting a divorce?
Now, I finally had the chance to get the answers I wanted. David calmed down, his voice devoid of any affection.
You want to know? Fine, I'll show you.
David snapped his fingers, and the scenes began to unfold again.
Help, help, me.
This was the 11-year-old David. There were a few cardboard boxes nearby, indicating they had just moved in.
Anyone, please save me.
It was David's voice, but his mouth didn't move. A beep sound interrupted the scene with an eerie mechanical tone.
Detected host's life is weak. Would you like to bind to the survival system?
At this moment, David was lying on the ground, barely conscious, too weak to ponder where this strange electronic voice was coming from. He just wanted to survive.
Yes, yes, bind it.
Binding successful. To be saved, you must listen to the heartfelt words of the one who rescues you.
The electronic voice disappeared. The room returned to silence. Before David could think about how illogical this system was, the door opened. A beam of light shone into the small room, making it look less lifeless. It was Mom. The scene abruptly ended.
Strange, isn't it?
Before I could react, he continued.
I asked if you find it strange? This broken system, I'd been bound to it for 70 years. Do you know how I got through these 70 years? Like a dog. Just to stay alive.
I couldn't see the expression on David's face. He wasn't looking at me, but kept staring at the scene. I tried to speak but found myself almost voiceless.
But Mom is gone.
David seemed to hear the biggest joke ever and started laughing maniacally.
You mean to say your mom is dead, right?
I stopped moving. My mother's passing had always been a hurdle for me. She had cancer, but I was preparing for my college entrance exams. She didn't want me to worry, didn't want to hold me back. So she kept it from me, and after the exams, what greeted me was a box of ashes.
Let me show you how your mom tormented me.
David turned away, unwilling to continue looking at me. David revealed his wound to me. He was dressed in a white coat, sitting next to a frail woman. The oversized hospital gown wrapped around her like a cocoon. Seeing this scene, my nose tingled, and I instinctively reached out to wipe away my tears. My hand passed through my cheek to the other side. The woman lying on the bed was my mother. It had been 62 years since I last saw her. Even in her weakened state, I recognized her at a glance. The woman on the bed waved her hands aimlessly, trying to grasp something. David extended his hand, letting her hold it.
Little David, take care of Emily for me. Consider it my debt in this life.
Before my mother could finish her sentence, the machine beside her emitted a piercing, prolonged beep. I couldn't bear to watch any longer. Witnessing the final moments of my closest relative was too overwhelming.
No! Mom, no!
The system's voice echoed from all directions, cold and electronic.
Detected the passing of the gratitude recipient. Identity automatically extends to the next generation. Please note, host.
David's soul floated before me. Looking at the face I had been so familiar with, I felt a sense of unreality for the first time. David's soul was hollow, in every sense. He pulled out a twisted smile, his eyes dark and his cheekbones protruding.
Sophia, are you satisfied? I've been repaying you for 62 years.
The scenes behind David switched rapidly, this time from his perspective, making the world seem completely upside down.
David, don't work too hard. Come home for dinner every day, okay?
From David's side, it turned into him enduring his boss's scolding, risking his promotion, and coming home on time every day to play the role of a good husband.
All right, Emily. I'll try my best.
At night, lying in David's arms, a casual remark from me.
I really want to eat the dumplings you make tomorrow morning.
Turned into David having to wake up early to buy ingredients and make dumplings.
Sure, I'll make them.
The promise David made on his 30th birthday.
I'll spend every birthday with you, Emily.
Transformed into the pressure of having to celebrate each birthday grandly.
Why didn't you tell me all this?
Would it have made a difference? You always say this is worth commemorating, that is worth commemorating. Would it make a difference to someone like you who commemorates everything?
Hearing David's words, I couldn't find a reason to argue.
I loved David and believed every day was worth commemorating.
But this love, to David, was a mountain, pressing down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. The scene flashed back to the night before David ended my life. I was sitting on the bed, knitting a sweater, while David had already lain down.
David, tomorrow is my birthday.
David kept his eyes closed, not looking at me. Judging by the movement of his eyeballs under his eyelids, I could tell he was still awake.
80 years old. I ordered a cake, strawberry flavored. Let's share it together.
David finally opened his eyes, giving me a fleeting glance, then turned over with difficulty, showing me his back.
If you like it, buy it.
After turning 40, David no longer encouraged buying cakes, thinking they were only for children. The next day, when I got up, David was already gone. The cake shop was a bit far from home, so I hobbled out with my cane. The young girl at the cake shop was very polite, meeting me at the entrance. She helped me into the shop and found a soft chair for me to sit on.
Granny, why did you come so early?
To pick up the cake.
The young girl carefully wrapped the cake layer by layer and put it in a large bag so I could carry it more easily. As she handed me the cake, she casually asked,
Can you finish it all by yourself? Don't force yourself. Be careful, it's a bit heavy.
I smiled as I took the cake, holding it in my arms, the wrinkles on my face bunching up.
My husband and I will eat it together.
The young girl helped me to the door, offering to accompany me home, but I declined. The last thing she said to me was,
That's wonderful, you and your husband.
Holding the cake, I didn't go straight home but headed to the pavilion in the community. It was the best time for morning exercise, and the community was bustling. I placed the cake on the table and opened it. I dipped my finger into the cream on the edge and put it in my mouth. The sweet taste spread in my mouth, taking me back to my 26th birthday. This was my first birthday after marrying David. I had ordered the cake myself, and through the transparent bag, I could see the fresh strawberries and smooth cream. I couldn't resist and sneaked to the nearby pavilion to take a bite of the cake. Later, when we celebrated at home and cut the cake, I made sure to place the part one had touched with my finger towards myself. Even though it was my birthday, I felt a pang of guilt.
Sophia, is there something you're hiding from me?
His sudden question left me bewildered.
What?
David leaned in and kissed me directly. The taste of strawberries lingered in our mouths, and the atmosphere grew increasingly intimate. Before I could react, I felt breathless. When he finally released my lips, David had somehow returned to his seat.
Strawberry flavor.
This could be considered the only kiss David and I shared over all these years. Thinking back on it now, I still feel a bit embarrassed. David was really good at it. As if seizing a breakthrough, I rewound the scene and paused at that kiss.
Did you ever like me?
Afraid the truth might be too harsh, I used the word like.
Sophia, are you really that naive or just pretending?
The scene suddenly zoomed in, focusing on David's hand gripping the table. His fist was clenched so tightly that the veins on his arm bulged from the restricted blood flow. Everything hinted at his restraint. How could it be? The cold system voice interrupted again at the worst possible moment. Detected the female lead is distressed. Please host, act quickly to comfort her.
Reminder, detected the female lead is distressed. Please host, act quickly to comfort her.
David spread his hands, looking indifferent.
This is the answer you wanted.
David, what is happening to us?
We are characters created by an author, Emily.
What do you mean?
We were given names, identities, and a conclusion where we grow old together. But the middle part of our story was left out.
The mechanical voice was there to correct this situation. The usual methods of correction, depending on severity, included creating accidents, sending dreams as hints, and life-threatening coercion. David happened to be subjected to the last method.
So, we are just characters in a story?
Yes, Emily. Our lives are an illusion, our actions merely to advance the plot.
I clutched my chest where my heart was missing, but I loved David, just as the heroine loves the hero.
Sophia, do you still believe in that ridiculous lie that you love me?
My love for you is not a lie.
You love me? What did I do to make you love me? Did I save your life? Was I good to you?
Of course.
Reflecting on the past, there wasn't a single thing about David that I loved. So why did I like him so much?
Have you figured it out, heroine?
No. But when I ask myself, do I like David?
The answer was yes. Now, it seems David has become more patient with me. He answered every single one of my questions.
Why are you doing this, David?
Because you are the heroine, and I am the hero.
Do you really mean that?
You must love me, and I must love you.
As if I had received the ultimate answer, my soul began to burn. Soon, it turned from white to red.
Beep, beep, detected the heroine's disillusionment with the hero. The ending is about to change. Beep, beep, please note, host.
My soul felt light, as if it was about to be fully cooked. Before my consciousness faded, I heard David's final words.
Sophia, I have finally rid myself of you.
The David who loved me the most died 70 years ago, before he even met me. And 70 years later, I still held genuine feelings for him.
Emily? Emily?
I heard someone calling my name and slowly opened my eyes, still groggy. The sharp smell of disinfectant invaded my nostrils.
Where am I?
The man sitting by my bed saw that I was awake and tightly held my hand. His hand was warm, enveloping mine completely.
This is the hospital. Do you feel any discomfort?
His face was pale, with dark circles under his eyes. I pulled my hand away and smoothed the worry lines on his forehead.
I'm fine. It's just having a baby. Why are you, the father, more nervous than I am?
The man in front of me is John, a senior from my high school who is now a surgeon. Our connection dates back to a college reunion.
When the bottle spun to me for the 5th time, I had to draw a dare card, ask the first person of the opposite sex who walks in within the next 10 minutes for their contact information. Holding my phone, my friend cheered me on from the side.
Here he comes.
The man, backlit by the moonlight, held up his phone with a QR code. I was so nervous that I almost dropped my phone. A large hand caught it just in time. After scanning, I met his amused gaze.
Be careful.
Later, I found out his name was John.
He had a crush on me since high school, and it was my best friend who helped him place the card.
By the time I pulled out the card, John was already at the bar entrance.
He timed it perfectly, entering exactly 10 minutes later.
I lay on the hospital bed, wrapped in the oversized patient gown. John was asleep beside my bed, his fluffy head facing me. I couldn't resist reaching out to touch it.
The man woke up.
What's wrong, Emily? Do you need some water?
His eyes weren't even open yet, but he was already asking anxiously.
How long has it been since you washed your hair?
3 days.
John lowered his head again, holding up 2 fingers to indicate. Haven't I told you? No matter how busy you are, you need to wash your hair. Go wash it now.
He had once developed a scalp condition from not washing his hair properly due to being too busy. Now, like a nagging mother, I constantly reminded him to wash his hair every few days.
But if I leave, who will take care of you?
A middle-aged woman appeared at the door, holding a thermal lunchbox.
Daughter, look what Mom made for you.
Mom set up the bedside table, opened the lunchbox, and the delicious aroma teased my taste buds.
It's braised ribs.
I looked at John behind my mom, signaling with my eyes that someone was here to take care of me, and he could leave. Only then did John quietly close the door and leave. The scene paused at the hospital door.
What's going on? Why is she with John?
David, still floating in midair, was taken aback by his own words.
Am I really going back to check on Sophia?
This is because, in the heroine's world, the author only created the male lead and the second male lead. Now that the male lead has disappeared, John naturally becomes the male lead, the one who will spend his life with the heroine.
David's eyes widened in disbelief. Had his 70 years been for nothing?
I ask you, what qualifies John to be the male lead?
The more David thought about it, the angrier he became. The sudden shift was too much for him to accept. Just moments ago, she had professed her love for him, and now she was wholeheartedly devoted to someone else. A black mist appeared behind David, soon condensing into the shape of a robot.
I am Plot Modification Unit 1. You can ask me any questions.
David swung a punch, and the robot turned back into black mist, only to recondense into a robot beside him.
I'm asking you, what qualifies John? Does he deserve it?
The robot blinked, calculating internally.
The heroine only has impressions of two people, you, the host, and John. You altered the plot and disappeared from the heroine's world. Now, she only remembers John.
Good job, Sophia, you're quite good at getting close to men. You said you loved me, but you cheated.
The robot's duty was to answer any questions, even if David wasn't directly speaking to it.
To be precise, it was the host who introduced them.
Me?
Now it was David's turn to be confused. Some memories began to awaken in his mind. That day, David's project had just been rejected, and he was preparing to take his computer back to make revisions when he found it broken. Then he received a call from Sophia.
David, I'm not feeling well. Can you come pick me up?
Where?
Before he could finish, the call was cut off. Anger and years of pent-up frustration exploded within him. David had an idea. Aunt Lee had only asked him to take care of Sophia, not to marry her, and he had wasted his life on her. With this thought, David's previously troubled mood vanished. Just then, John, who had just finished surgery, came back.
Hey, our handsome David has another date, huh?
David ignored him, scribbled the bar's address on a piece of paper, and shoved it into John's hands. Grabbing his briefcase, he prepared to leave.
Go to this address and pick someone up.
Before John could react, David had disappeared.
To be more precise, it was the host who facilitated this relationship.
The mechanical voice interrupted David's recollection. David took a deep breath.
Forget it, let bygones be bygones. When can I leave?
The robot turned into a black mist, which then gathered into a question mark before transforming back into a robot.
In theory, we can only modify the plot, but the author set up two paths for the heroine, the male lead and the second male lead. And the host only has one path with the heroine. Although John is now the male lead, the host still counts. The male and female leads need to grow old together. If the host wants to leave, you'll have to wait until the heroine passes away.
David's soul could no longer hold on and collapsed to the ground. Reflecting on his life, he realized that indeed, Sophia was the only one in it.
Sophia, why won't you let me go?
David's soul continued to expand until it couldn't hold on any longer and burst into a bubble, filling the entire white space. The white bubble slowly consumed the scene until it was no longer visible, eventually being swallowed by the black mist.
Beep, host vaporization detected. Screening for a suitable next host.